Hello again, this is Sherry Gallagher with Technicon Company Incorporated, and this video is going to address ISO 9001-2015 Section 8, Operations. It's a long one. First of all, let's look at an overview. When ISO 9001 was presented in the late 1980s, there was the mistaken concept that the standard was simply for manufacturers and manufacturing. It was and is a management system and not limited to manufacturing systems. In the 1980s, the concept was to inspect quality in the product. There was one group, operations, responsible for making the product quickly and as cheaply as possible, and another group, quality, were to inspect and prevent too much non-conforming material from reaching the customer. Producing 97 or 98% conforming product was a company with outstanding quality. Through prevention, planning, and organizational attitude toward the quality, the normal expectation is producing at parts per million defect level, or 99.99964% conforming product. ISO 9001 has always been about reducing costs through preventing nonconformances and prevention, not detection. The operations section of the ISO 9001-2015 standard is directly related to the production of product or services. The sections of the standard are operational planning and control, requirements for products and services, design, which we're going to do separately and not in this section, control of externally provided processes, products, and services, production and service provision, release of products and services, control of nonconforming output. So let's start with operational planning and control. It's all about implementing and controlling the process. The planning should be suitable to the organization and its operation. Once again, a small company versus a large multinational company, or a complex product versus a simple one-step process product, will implement planning and control very differently. Operational planning is the point where the company identifies the processes to produce each product, the requirements of the processes, determines the needed resources, implements control of the processes, determine, maintain, and retain documented information. This is the answer as to why companies charged with designing the manufacturing process for a product controlled by the customer are not design responsible. This is the point where the company must understand the capability of their process and equipment and determine if they are capable of producing product at the parts per million defect level and any other requirements of the process, such as temperature, pressure, etc. If the company is not capable, the organization must determine what resources are needed to make the process capable. The organization must also determine if enough existing resources are available, such as machine time or trained personnel. Is a second or third shift needed? Are there enough trained operators and supervision to add shifts? Resources are both equipment and people, and according to Dr. Deming, people are the most important resource of all. Some level of control is needed, whether it is a first and last piece inspection, a specified method of setup and run parameters, or statistical process control of key performance indicators. Knowing the controls, the organization must establish the documented information collected to provide evidence the process is in control. This includes a record of the measurement devices and software used to accept the product as conforming. The organization must also determine how the documented information will be collected, stored, retrieved, the retention period, and the method of disposal. So here are some examples. An injection molder will place controls on the type, size, and shape of the raw material, and the size of the press. The molder will track injection pressure and temperature. They may also track external factors such as humidity. Since the product is expected to have a useful life of approximately a year, they'll set the minimum retention period for approximately 2 years. Another example is a pharmaceutical company. They will control the parameters of the batching process and test the effectiveness of those controls prior to sending the material to filling. Filled material will again be tested to ensure no contamination occurred in the filling process before sending to packaging. Packaged material will be warehoused and the location of each batch of material going to each customer will be identified. The product has a very specific expiration date and records will be kept for the effectiveness period plus an additional period determined by the organization and regulatory requirements. Moving on to products and services. The performance requirements come from the customer and the organization's own expertise in the product and manufacturing process, as well as the statutory and regulatory requirements. An important factor to determine early in the negotiation process is who at the customer has the authority to make decisions. Here's a simple example. A product engineer designed a component part for the equipment being built. Procurement sent the order out to an approved supplier. The approved supplier did not have the necessary manufacturing equipment and contacted procurement to change the drawing so that they could manufacture the component part. Procurement approved the changes without approaching engineering. The entire order was unusable when it was received because of the approval process and the fact that it was procurement that approved it, not engineering. It was a long, drawn-out discussion as to whether the supplier would be paid or not. Important documents for review when communicating with a customer are purchase orders, contracts, and drawings. If the customer is supplying a component of the product, the requirement includes delivery time and expected quality of the component must be defined. The organization should always have a contingency plan. For example, one of my clients receives a component from their customer and modifies it to create the finished product. The customer is notoriously late or short quantities of raw material. However, when rating my client as a supplier, they gave my client a poor rating for on-time delivery and demanded a corrective action. My client was able to demonstrate that 100% of the late deliveries were due to the customer-supplied product. For a corrective action, my client required the customer to keep a stock of material at my client's facility against future orders. As usual, it's up to the organization to know, understand, and comply with the applicable regulatory and statutory requirements. The company must meet the claims of these requirements. If the product has a UL or CSA approval, the manufactured product must meet those requirements with no deviations. The last piece of this section is very important. The organization must ensure it has the capability to meet all the requirements, including delivery and post-delivery activities, before accepting the order. Delivery is an important requirement according to ISO 9001:2015 and must be met. Going on to control of externally provided processes and products and services. In ISO 9001:2015, there's been a slight attitude change when controlling suppliers. In previous editions, auditors looked to see if there was an approved supplier list, how suppliers were approved, how they were rated, and where necessary removed from the approved supplier list. There was discussion early in the process, usually including a review or test of the supplied product. Afterwards, it was the supplier's responsibility to control their process and provide product meeting requirements. The supplier had quite a bit of autonomy to make changes in the process or materials without notifying the customer. However, after several scandals, and you can look up the 60 Minutes report on VOC flooring, purchased by Lumber Liquidators, and the steel scandal from Japan, the organization making the purchase is required to take responsibility for the conformity of the requirements of the materials or services they purchase. So this includes products shipped directly from the outside supplier to the customer. The organization now needs to approve both the product and the supplier's process and perform validation of the supplier's activities from time to time. Typically, there's also a quality agreement limiting what changes the supplier can make. Now, this can also take the producer, the manufacturer, can take a coupon of materials and send it out for analysis or observe the supplier's process on a regular basis to ensure that they are actually following and meeting the requirements of the supplied product. All right, product and service provision. At this point, the organization has defined a process, the requirements of the process, and has raw materials and components meeting the requirements. It's time to make the product. The organization should have the necessary documentation to guide the manufacturing process to make consistently conforming product that can include bills of materials, methods of manufacture, job travelers or routing sheets, testing requirements, and documentation. The organization must ensure the necessary monitoring and measuring equipment is available and meets the requirements of Section 7.1.5, Monitoring and Measuring Resources. Adequate infrastructure and work environment. competent and qualified personnel, validation and periodic revalidation of the ability to achieve planned results where product cannot be verified, identify and eliminate human error, implement a system to release and deliver product and post-delivery activities. The organization is finally making product to sell. Let's talk about identification and traceability. Traceability requirements vary from industry to industry and product to product. In pharmaceuticals, traceability at every step and after every sale is critical. In consumer goods, usually traceability linked through bulk packaging is enough. Having part-level traceability can come in handy. I was working for a first-tier automotive supplier. The customer was charging back 1% of sales for non-conforming product returned from the user, but did not require corrective action. I requested the return of the non-conforming parts, only to find they were manufactured by a competitor. Having the ability to identify our parts saved our company 1% of gross sales. ISO 9001:2015 does require the status of all product to be identified at all steps. This can be as simple as a copy of the traveler in each bin, or an identification location for tested material ready to move to the next process. It is important the organization communicate what these measures are and train to meet them. It is becoming more popular to use barcode labels or barcode on the traveler and using scanners to verify the correct material was utilized. All right, now customer-provided property. You must take care of the customer-provided property. Maintain the property according to agreements, store it adequately, and be able to identify it immediately. Customer property should be protected from damage and periodically inspected. The results of the inspection, including any loss or damaged material, must be reported to the customer. The communication with the customer is documented information. Customer property can be molds or raw materials and components, or intellectual properties, or personal data. Think a medical billing company. Okay, moving on to preservation. Preservation is more than preventing shipping damage, although that is also part of the requirement. As product moves through the system, it must be protected. Steel parts may need to be placed on racks to prevent damage. Computer code needs to be protected from insertions or deletions. Preservation also links back to identification and traceability, as it includes maintaining identification. Even storage must be reviewed. I work with a company that has a warehouse in humid environment. Product was stored and corrugated and stacked several boxes high. Of course, product on the bottom of the pile was crushed and the company had to implement environmental controls. Post-delivery activities. Now, this is one of the clauses most frequently deemed not applicable. Still, care should be taken before indicating it's not to be audited. If a helpline exists, that is a post-delivery activity. To determine if post-delivery activities are required, consider statutory and regulatory requirements, potential undesirable consequences associated with a product or service. If you wire it incorrectly, will the building burn down? The nature and intent of and lifetime of the product. Marshmallows are used up much more quickly than a steel part, so no service or installation is really required for the marshmallow, unless you want directions on how to make a s'more. Customer requirements. After installing new software, there's a learning curve. If there isn't a helpline, what will the customer rating be for the product, and how likely are you to make future sales? Customer feedback. If I don't understand the instructions and drop a frozen turkey into a deep fryer, who has the liability? Those are all places where you may need post-delivery activities. Moving on to control of change. Nothing stays the same. We must always be able to address change. The organization must control and plan for change and the associated risks. We can no longer buy a piece of equipment and see if it's going to create nonconformances without having safeguards to keep those nonconformances from getting to the customer. Release of product and services. Have you ever gotten to the end of a project only to realize you made a mistake at the beginning and now must disassemble the whole thing and start over? You should see my desk from IKEA. That is the point of this section of the standard. Product should be tested as it proceeds or processing parameters monitored and reviewed so nonconformances can be caught as early in the process as possible and corrected. In some cases, final testing can take months to complete. The organization must either hold the product for that time period or get permission from a relevant authority or customer. If the product is a concrete foundation, cores will be taken and tested to ensure the foundation can hold the weight of the building. Some tests take into account and adjust for curing time, so the construction project does not have to be shut down until the concrete is cured. As usual, the organization must keep appropriate documented information that include evidence of conformity and traceability to the person authorizing the release. Who signed the bottom line? Did you know that frontline supervision in a pharmaceutical company has a very responsible role? If the supervisor knowingly releases nonconforming product resulting in death, the supervisor can be charged with criminally negligent homicide. Finally, let's go on to the control of nonconforming output. This is the last element we will cover in this video. The controls are pretty straightforward. Segregate and identify nonconforming product and prevent it from getting back into the production stream or to the customer. If the nonconformance is detected after delivery, evaluate on-hand product, segregate and identify it, and determine if other customers need to be notified to destroy or return product. Actions to address nonconforming product can be correction, rework to conforming and have verification testing, inform the customer, obtain authorized acceptance under concession. But be careful of this one, because if the product is certified by an outside source such as UL or CSA, a concession is not an option. And then finally, the last action is suspension of provision. Stop making it and stop selling it. Documented information must include a description of the nonconformity, the actions taken, any concessions, the authority deciding the actions in respect to the nonconformity. Whoa, this is a long one. Keep in mind, for many years, this section of the standard was the main section implemented. ISO 9001-2015 was considered a manufacturing standard. Section 8 operations is the implementation of the standard in generating the saleable product, goods, or services. It includes planning, defining, controlling, outsourcing processes, and non-conforming product. So there we have it, folks. Again, if you have any questions, you can reach us at technicon1986@sbcglobal.net or on our website, www.technicon.com, or call us at 708-814-3685. Go out and have a great day.